Yom Tov, Shkoyach. So, what I would like to propose is, in response to Rabbi Helm's question, is Chassidus in our hands? I would like to propose that the answer is no. And I want to explain why the answer is no. The Hayom Yom of Yutas Kislev has an introduction. Before actually the entry for Yutas Kislev, there's an introduction. It's an excerpt from the letter of the Rebbe Rashab from the year Tov Reish Samach Beis. And that was a famous letter that Rebbe Rashab first called Yutas Kislev Rosh Hashanah for Divrei Elokim Chaim, which in other words is Rosh Hashanah for Chassidus. And over there, the beginning of the quote is Hayom Hazeh, this day, Hu Rosh Hashanah L'Divrei Elokim Chaim, Asher Hinchilunu Aviseinu HaKadoshim, Zecher Tzadikim V'Kadoshim, Livrocha L'Chaya Elam Haba, Yishmos HaMeid Schusam Yogin Aleinu, V'Hi Teres Aval Shem Tov, Zechreinu Livrocha. This day is the Rosh Hashanah for Chassidus, which we inherited from our forefathers, the holy ones. May the memory be for a blessing. And V'Hi, this is truly the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov. What is this emphasis, V'Hi Teres of Baal Shem Tov? What is he coming to say over here? This day is the Rosh Hashanah for which Chassidus? The Chassidus that we inherited from Rabbi Seinu. Which Chassidus is this? Obviously, he's referring to Chassidus Chabad. It's Rosh Hashanah for Chassidus, and he doesn't say Chabad in the letter, but he says Asher Nechilunu Rabbi Seinu Akdoshim. He's talking about Chassidus Chabad, but then he emphasizes. He finds it necessary to emphasize the He Teres of Al Shem Tov. What is the emphasis for? So to try to begin to answer this question in a manner that's very unlike Yutas Kislev, I will try to give like a lecture, a little shtickle lecture. If you look in Igr's Kodesh of the Alter Rebbe, the new version, there's an introduction by Rebbe Levine. Very nice introduction about the history of the Alter Rebbe's life as indicated in the Rebbe's letters, specifically in the Alter Rebbe's letters. From the letters is the best history you have. It's Tersha B'Ksav. The best biography you could get, most accurate, is in the letters of the Alter Rebbe. And over there, we see interesting thing. The Magid was Nistalik Tov Kuf Lamed Gim. Tov Kuf Lamed Zayin, the greatest Talmidim of the Magid, which the Alter Rebbe considered his teachers, depart to Eretz Yisrael. The Alter Rebbe wanted to join them, he didn't. They asked him to stay and lead Chassidim in the whole territory of White Russia, Lithuania, and that area. And they pleaded that he should stay. He very reluctantly stayed. Tov Kuf Lamed Zayin. He didn't agree to accept the anhaga, to the leadership. He agreed to be a Magid in Liyazna. He wanted to take just the responsibility for one town, Liyazna. This was Tov Kuf Lamed Zayin. Tov Kuf Mem Gimel. This is 10 years after the Magid Zistalkus. The Rebbes of the Alter Rebbe, which the Alter Rebbe calls them in Haggadah to Tanya, he calls them Rabbi Seinu Sheberetz HaKodesh. That is actually a phrase from the Gemara. Rabbi Seinu Sheberetz HaKodesh. Rabbi Seinu Sheberetz HaKodesh is Pashtus referring to both the the Mendel Horodoker, which was the Alter Rebbe's Rebbe, after the Maggid Zistalkus, and perhaps also to Avram Kalisker, I'm not sure. It says plural tense, Rabbi Seinu, maybe that means also it includes Rabbi Avram Kalisker, who was older than the Alter Rebbe, and in many ways was more senior, and in many ways he was instrumental in getting the Alter Rebbe to agree to lead Chassidim. Many letters came from Reb Mendele, number one, and also from Avram Kalisker to the Alter Rebbe, pleading that the Alter Rebbe should agree to lead Chassidim. Now, why do I say maybe Reb Avram Kalisker? You'll see soon. I have also a raya from the Gemara that when it says Rabbi Seinu Sheberetz HaKodesh, it doesn't have to mean two people, because it's going on Rabbi. Rabbi Seinu Sheberetz HaKodesh is going on Rabbi. It doesn't have to mean two people. In the Gemara, it's just going on Rabbi. So it could be that Rabbi Seinu Sheberetz HaKodesh, even though it's plural tense, it's only going on the Mendel Horodoker. Anyhow, we'll soon see why I have a question about this, what Alter Rebbe means in time. Let's go weiter. So Tav Kuf Mem Gimel, Tav Kuf Mem Hey, the Alter Rebbe finally accepts upon himself some form of leadership in the whole territory. Tav Kuf Mem Ches is when Reb Mendele is nostalgic. Tav Kuf Mem Ches. The only one senior from the Maggid's Talmidim in Eretz HaKodesh is Rabbi Avram Kalisker, the Kohen HaGadol. HaKohen. I believe he was a Kohen, yes. So he remained in Tveria, in Eretz HaKodesh, and he continued to guide Chassidim in Russia. And he continued to write many letters that Chassidim should be loyal to the Alter Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe should take responsibility for Chassidim. Why did he have to write to Chassidim they should be loyal to the Alter Rebbe? The Alter Rebbe was not very popular everywhere. He was popular by some, he wasn't popular by everyone. A lot of Chassidim in Russia felt that maybe this is too difficult for them, Alter Rebbe's way, maybe it's not what they were used to when they had the other Talmidei HaMagid were leading. Alter Rebbe was a unique way. They wanted to bring Reb Shloime Karliner to Russia, to Vitebsk. And the Alter Rebbe and his Talmid, Reb Aaron Halevi from Strasheller, they both wrote, there's no problem. You could visit other Rebbes. You could go to other Rebbes. I'm not makpid. My colleagues, Alter Rebbe says, are makpid. I'm not makpid. You go to other Rebbes, there's no problem. And Rabbi Strasheller explains this. He says, the only reason why maybe it's not kedai to go to other Rebbes is because you give somebody an eitzah, and then he goes to somebody else, and he takes an eitzah. So the second time around, you're giving him an eitzah, he's not the same person, he changes. So b'meila, it's not advisable maybe to go to many Rebbes and get many eitzahs, but mitzada iskashrus, he says, ein Rabbeinu makpid klal. We don't have this concept, he says, to dafka be loyal to dafka one Rebbe. Come, you learn Chassidus, that's good. You're welcome to learn Chassidus. You could go to other Rebbes too and visit other Rebbes. And that's how it was. There were many Chassidim in the generation of the Alter Rebbe that also visited other tzaddikim. Just on a side note, in Tanya, every time he mentions tzaddikim, he mentions them plural. He says, Roshei Alfei Yisrael. So in Tanya you don't think you find this exclusivity that there's one Moshe Rabbeinu. On the contrary, the Nitzotzos of Moshe Rabbeinu are by Roshei Alfei Yisrael. At least we didn't find an emphasis from the Alter Rebbe. There has to be an exclusive iskashrus. You didn't find it. I don't think we find that. At least the Strasheller, Rabbi Aaron Strasheller says clearly he's not making mitzvah iskashrus. Anyway, but Rabbi Aaron. Rabbi Avram HaKohen from Kalisk, he was demanding that Chassidim should not go visit others. And they should be completely loyal to the Alter Rebbe. Because that's the only way, and the Alter Rebbe is the true continuation of the Maggid. And do not think the Nesias are not, traveling to other tzaddikim is not advisable. Contrary to what the Alter Rebbe says, that he's not exclusive, he is exclusive. This is about Avram Kohen Mekalis. And this went on, and the Alter Rebbe Taka was Mekabel more and more the Hanhaga, and his Hanhaga, his leadership became stronger and stronger. His influence became stronger and stronger in the entire territory. By the way, back to the story that they wanted to bring him Shlomo Karliner, they wanted to bring him to Vitebsk. Alter Rebbe said he's masking on 3 conditions. He's masking because on the one hand, the Mendele gave him the Mendele said that Alter Rebbe is the leader of Chassidim in this territory. So Rabbi Shlomo felt that he had to ask permission from the Alter Rebbe. And the Alter Rebbe said he's masking that he should fear a Rabbistebe, he should be a Rebbe in Vitebsk, which is very close to Liozne. However, on 3 conditions, and listen to the 3 conditions. I don't know the order, I don't remember the order. The first condition, I'm just saying it out of order. The first condition in my memory is that the Chassidim, he should not educate the Chassidim to be mevatel, the simple Yiras Shamayim of the Prosta Yidden. The simple frumkeit of Yidden, do not put that down. Second thing is, do not put down the Lumdim that are not Chassidim, the sages that are not Chassidim, put them down. That's another condition. And the third condition is, and this is the most important condition, as we'll see, the third condition is that he should not preach the shita of tzaddik ve'emunasoi yichaya. The pasuk says yichya, and there was a very big emphasis. The early days of Chassidus, al tikri yichya el yichaya, that the tzaddik provides the energy and the life force to Chassidim. That was the third condition. That was the most significant condition, and I think that Rabbi Shlomo was masking to the first 2. I believe that he couldn't be masking to the third. Now here is what happened. Tov Kuf Nun Vav. Alter Rebbe prints the Tanya. Maybe the beginning of Tov Kuf Nun Zayin. It's publicized. And this is about how many years? It's about 20 some years after the Maggid Zistalkus. From Tov Kuf Lamed Gimel to Tov Kuf Nun Vav. So it's 23 years after the Maggid Zistalkus, Alter Rebbe prints the Tanya. And Rabbi Avram Kalisker writes the Alter Rebbe a letter. I do not see what you gained with the Tanya. I do not think it's correct what you write in the Hakdam, that people should use the Tanya instead of coming to you. I do not think it's correct that you are appointing Gedolim Shebe'ir. Alter Rebbe says in the introduction, if you don't understand what it says and how you should learn from the Tanya, go to the Gedolim Shebe'ir. Who are these Gedolim Shebe'ir? So Rebbe Levin shows that the Alter Rebbe had appointed in each community of Chassidim, specific Chassidim, 3 Zkenim Chassidim that were the Gedolim Shebe'ir. And Rabbi Avram Kalisker takes issue with this. He says you cannot appoint them as ones who should teach Chassidus. They have to come to the Rebbe. And before that he says something very serious. He says something very severe. He says, Chas le lazar de Abba. I have a lot of pity on your son, the Mittel Rebbe. I have a lot of pity on him. You're making him a leader, and he's very young. He's going to have gaiva. Very interesting. And it's not right for Chassidim to have to follow his directives. He's not yet a Rebbe. He's not yet a Rebbe. How could you delegate to the Mittel Rebbe? And he says, Kal v'chomer, you can't. He says, how much more so you can't delegate to Stam Chassidim? And he says like this. He says, Chassidim have to have emunas chachamim and yedias chisroinim. They have to believe in the chachamim and they have to know that they are deficient. They have to know that they are lacking. That's all. That's what Chassidim need to know. They have to know that they're lacking, and therefore they come. And when they come and they're connected, that's what they need. So he doesn't say what happened today. what happened with the Tanya. It doesn't explain, but seemingly the substance of the reason is because the Chassidus of the Alter Rebbe was more and more Chabad, in the style of Chabad, was nispashet more and more. So here he felt that this is not exactly what the Baal Shem Tov taught, the Magi taught, his other Talmidim. He felt that this was a new derech, and therefore he questioned this. Interestingly, the letter reached Alter Rebbe before he went to Petersburg. It was before he was in jail. And the Alter Rebbe didn't answer, and he writes them in Tov Kuf Samach. He writes them, I didn't respond to you because of the jail, because so the response was, I guess, in Tov Kuf, the letter was in Tov Kuf Nun Tes maybe, or Nun Ches, and the response is Tov Kuf Samach. I don't know why it took so long, but the Alter Rebbe responds to him. And then Rabbi Avram Kalisker responds that I apologize, I understand, and there's only love between us, and everything is kiloi hai. Continue. Now, this continued for a little bit longer, but in the last 10 years of the Alter Rebbe's Nesius, there was a machlokes. And this was already after the first enjailment, and the second meiser, the second enjailment, which was in Tov Kuf Samach Aleph, Tov Kuf Samach Beis, and Tov Kuf Samach Aleph, and then in Tov Kuf Samach Gimel, there was a machlokes between the tzaddikim. I'm not going to get into it so much, but I just want to tell you, just interesting to know, that the first time that Chassidei Chabad were called Chabad was in Tov Kuf Samach Gimel. We were not called Chabad. Chassidus Chabad, actually, I shouldn't say we, but Chassidus Chabad was not called Chabad till Tov Kuf Samach Gimel. We're called Chassidim. Chassidim were Chassidim. Chassidei Reisen, the Chassidim of Russia. When did it become Chabad? It became Chabad in Tov Kuf Samach Gimel. At that time, Tov Kuf Samach Gimel, Tov Kuf Samach Hey. The last 10 years of the Alter Rebbe was not accepted. His shita was not accepted by wasn't accepted by all of the tzaddikim. There were tzaddikim that still continued to support the Alter Rebbe, and there were tzaddikim that opposed this shita. They felt that it was not the derech of the Baal Shem Tov. So now, I'm not going to start counting the tzaddikim, which tzaddikim supported, which tzaddikim didn't. I'm not going to name them. It's not important. It was a time that it was Mesiras Nefesh. And if you look in the Frierdiker Rebbe's Sichos, and you see that the Frierdiker Rebbe says, what the Alter Rebbe was Moiser Nefesh. Every time you see the Frierdiker Rebbe say, the Alter Rebbe was Moiser Nefesh for the derech of Chabad, you could, if you look into the letters and you look into the history, you could understand why it was Mesiras Nefesh. For the Alter Rebbe to be involved in a machlokes like this, that he is being suspected of deviating from the derech of the Baal Shem Tov, it's a tremendous Mesiras Nefesh. And he had to know, he had to have certain emunah pshuta, it was emunah, perfect emunah shlema, that this is exactly the kavanah of the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid, and that's why he was Meiser Nefesh, and it cost him a heavy price. But he was Meiser Nefesh for the derech of Chachma Bina V'das. And maybe this could explain us why the Rebbe Rashab finds it necessary to emphasize the he Torah Baal Shem Tov. Now, that's all the history, the timeline. Let's just speak on one more nekuda. What is the machlokes? What is the machlokes? So it seems like the derech of the other tzaddikim that opposed the Alter Rebbe. What was their derech? Their derech was less understanding of the secrets of the Torah that the Maggid and the Baal Shem Tov taught to Yechidei Skula, to the tzaddikim. Less understanding about Gadlus HaBoirei in a rational way, in an intellectual way, that even a simple neshama can understand. That's reserved for high neshamas. And rather, emunas tzaddikim. And that gives a simple neshama that gives a simple neshama very much. It can give a simple neshama passion and chayus in Avodas Hashem. That's the side that was, so to speak, opposing Chassidus Chabad. What was the Alter Rebbe's position, l'chayra? Alter Rebbe's position was, no, a neshama, a simple neshama, could also understand the lukus with its seichel. That's a very superficial understanding, and I don't think that's the correct way to present it. The Baal Shem Tov was Megala. He revealed that which is beyond seichel. Emunah that's beyond seichel. Ahava that's l'mayla mehaseichel. The Ava of a Yid, the Ava Atzmis of a Jew. Meaning, l'chayra, the chiddush of Chassidus has nothing to do with seichel. What does Chabad have to do with Chassidus, l'chayra? What does Chabad, Chacham bin Adas, have to do with Chassidus? If you think about it, is the Alter Rebbe adding something in addition to what the Maggid of Baal Shem Tov taught, or is it a continuation? The Maggid, I don't know what he taught. But let's speak about the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov, what was the Baal Shem Tov's chidushim? What was the Baal Shem Tov's chidushim? Learning Kabbalah. They learned Kabbalah before the Baal Shem Tov. The chayra, all the inyanim, the chidushim of the Baal Shem Tov, especially with regards to simple people, was the idea of chagas, meaning emotion in Avodas Hashem, passion in Avodas Hashem. Now, emotion, l'chayr, is connected not necessarily to seichel. Now, it could come from seichel, but we're talking about very, very special emotion. We're talking about gilui neshama. The neshama is beyond seichel. So when we're talking about ava, we're talking about ava that's born out of seichel. That's what the Baal Shem Tov taught. We're talking about ava of the neshama. Talking about emunah that's born out of chakira likis, out of philosophy. Talking about emunah from the neshama. Yira from the neshama. Everything from the neshama. What does it have to do with seichel? Seichel is philosophy. What does it have to do with the inyanim of the Baal Shem Tov? And then this is the big question. This is a very big question. L'chayr seichel contradicts emunah. Seichel, so to speak, even if it doesn't contradict emunah, it begins to contradict. But then, if you go deeper into seichel, it may agree with the emunah. But it's a concealment. It covers over the emunah. If somebody has emunah, and then you bring him, then he gets into the seichel conceals the emunah. You could say it even tarnishes the emunah. It darkens the emunah. How would you say it? It clouds the emunah. Emunah is pure. Seichel is seichel. Seichel is not pure. When a person, I had one time a yid sitting at my Shabbos table, knew about tshuva, and he was sitting in the Shabbos table. He was a young chassan with his wife. His wife came from a family, a Sephardic family, and he was a Baal Tshuva. So he starts speaking about questions in emunah that he read in a letter of the Rebbe. I told him, I felt like he's asking too much chakira dik Shabbos. I said, it's not for a Shabbos table. He asked me, why not? Why is it not for a Shabbos table? For a Shabbos table, you don't speak what if these chakiras of what if they have their place. But Shabbos is a time of emunah, it's a time of ava, yira. And also I felt his wife doesn't have these questions. I think she's just got married. She'd be surprised that her husband, he learned Chabad Chassidus, and he knows to be mefalpel, to make a pilpul in emunah, but it's a pilpul in emunah doesn't sound like a contradiction. Sounds like a contradiction. So there's a big shaila. How could the Alter Rebbe take Chassidus? Chassidus is something that's Gilui Neshama. You have to come to a tzaddik. A tzaddik has Gilui Neshama. He could connect you with your neshama. How could you delegate the Anhag of Chassidim to leaders that are not tzaddikim? How could you do that? How could you say, here's a sefer, here in this Tanya, you'll be able to learn this according to your seichel, and what will you get from it? With seichel, you get seichel. How are you going to get emunah from seichel? How could you be megala the emunah? On the contrary, the emunah will be covered by the seichel. It will conceal the emunah. Tzaddikim know how to learn the secrets of the Torah in a way that it's not going to tarnish their emunah. It's not going to ruin. It's not going to take away from their emunah. But a simple person, you're not teaching him the secrets as a secret. You're not teaching him it as Kabbalah. You're teaching him it as seichel that anyone can understand. That's philosophy, l'chayra. Chas v'sholem. Why should we learn philosophy? Why should we learn philosophy if the derech of the Baal Shem Tov is emunah? It's a very big problem, a very big shayla. And if you look in Tanya, where he speaks about, one of the places he speaks about, you have Tanya here? One of the places where he speaks about the connection to a tzaddik is Perek Mem Gimel. And over there you have a fascinating thing. Over there the Alter Rebbe says, the Rebbe speaks about Moshe Rabbeinu and the leaders of Yidden in every generation. The teachers of Yidden in every generation. No, it's Mem Beis, I'm sorry. Alter Rebbe speaks in Perek Mem Beis that there are 7 shepherds of Yidden. Moshe Rabbeinu is the shepherd of all shepherds. He's called the Raya Mehemna. And what does the Alter Rebbe explain? The shepherd of Emunah, what does he say? The Hainu Shemamshich B'chinas HaDas. He's Mamshich Das to Yidden. Leidas Hashem, to know the Eibishter. And then he explains, he says later, he says, why do you need, what do you need Das for? Alter Rebbe says like this. Alter Rebbe says like this. Das connects a Yid with a strong bond to the Eibishter, and he connects just like when he sees something with his physical eyes. And he sees it and he's mainik b'machshavtei. He deepens his thoughts about this thing that he sees, and he connects him to it. Das can connect the Yid to the Eibishter. And he says this koyach that a Yid has comes from Moshe Rabbeinu. What comes from Moshe Rabbeinu? The koyach hadas to bind with the Eibishter, to bond with the Eibishter. And he says like this. He says in Shulchan Aruch it says if you wake up in the morning and you want to get yourself out of bed, what do? You think that the Eibishter is standing upon you. You'll jump out of bed. That's what it says in Shulchan Aruch. And the Ramah brings down in Shulchan Aruch. You'll jump out of bed. The Alter Rebbe says it doesn't work. Try it. It won't work. The Alter Rebbe says, you know why it doesn't work? The Alter Rebbe says, Yesh nefesh feila b'tiva v'toldasa. Because there's low souls. It doesn't happen miyad yagieh levayira. Shulchan Aruch says it'll happen to you immediately. You'll have yiras Hashem if you imagine the Eibishter standing upon you. Alter Rebbe says that's for a high neshama. For a low neshama, lo tuchal limtzoi b'machshavta ha'eloikus. You will not be able to find in your machshava, you will not be able to find the eloikus in your machshava. Not the seichel. The eloikus you won't find. Ki'im bekushi ubechazka. Bekushi ubechazka. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu provides, and tzaddikim in every generation are mislavish beguf and nefesh al chachmei ador to provide this. What do the tzaddikim provide? The tzaddikim are not providing seichel, they're providing das. What does das bring? Das doesn't give you seichel. Das gives you l'mayla seichel. Das gives you emunah. If you ask, what's the main emphasis of Chabad? It's the Dalet of Chabad. Chachma Bina Das is the main emphasis of Chabad. The Alter Rebbe's Chiddush, and this is why it's such a big Chiddush that, every time you see a machlekes between Mefarshim, and one Mefarsh doesn't understand the other, a lot of times is because it's taka big Chiddush. There is a perspective that it's impossible to understand. In a certain perspective, the Chiddush is impossible to understand. You have to go to a higher level to understand this Chiddush. So one Mefarish is on his perspective, this thing is impossible to understand. And this Chiddush of the Alter Rebbe is something that Taka is not natural to understand. How can you understand that Das, which seems like lower than Chachma, lower than Bina, and Das will connect you to L'mayla me'adas, L'mayla me'chachma, L'mayla me'bina, connect you to the Emunah, will reveal Emunah. That's the Chiddush of the Alter Rebbe. The Chiddush of the Alter Rebbe is not the Seichel. Chiddush of the Alter Rebbe is that Seichel is Megal L'mayla me'seichel. But there's one condition. There's one condition. It has to be Moshe Rabbeinu who is giving you that Seichel. And that's why the Rebbe said, and I'll end off with this, Yefutzu ma'inisecha chutza. Chassidus was, the Baal Shem Tov was told by Melech HaMashiach, by the Neshama of Mashiach, in Heichal HaMashiach. Yefutzu ma'inisecha chutza. When Chassidus will spread like well springs, will spread to the outskirts, then Mashiach will come. So Chassidus is compared to a wellspring. Asks the Rebbe, why a wellspring? The Rebbe, one of the Nekudas that the Rebbe explains is, there's a din. The Mayon, the wellspring, has very special characteristics of tahor. It could be mitayr all the tumas, more than a mikveh. The kol shu, even with a drop. But there's one condition. Before that, there's another unique thing about a Mayon. It's mitayr b'zoichalim, even when it's spread, even when the water extends out. But there's one condition. It has to be mechubar. Once there's a hefsek, once the drop of water is not connected, it doesn't have a direct connection to the source, it loses the whole kayach of a mayan. Now it's a mikveh. Now you need all the rules of a mikveh. It has to be sealed, a sealed place that the water doesn't move out of. And then there's mem sa'ah, and it's not mitayr. It's not mitayr some tumois. But when it's a mayan, it's mitayr b'kol shu, it's mitayr all the tumois. It has to be mechubar. That's why Chassidus Chabad, on one hand it's Seichel, on the other hand Chassidus hat a balabos. Chassidus has a balabos. You cannot take an idea from Chassidus and expect it to do what Chassidus is supposed to do. Chassidus is supposed to reveal the Neshama. I have here a Sikha from Yutas Kisav Toshin Ches. Friedrich Rebbe says, Amol hot min geret, Asidah Chassidim Chagasnikis, und Chassidim Chabadnikis. Meint men it as Chagasnikis is nor Chagas und nicht Chabad. Chabadnikis meint men nor Chabad und nicht Chagas. It doesn't, it is Chagas Chassidim as Chabad Chassidim. It doesn't mean the Chagas is only Chagas. It doesn't mean the Chabad is only Chabad. It depends, he says, what's the Hatchol. But then in Purim Tavshin Ches, he says, Chassidus is Chagas. Hagam Chassidus is Chabad. But the Iker is Chagas. Now the Rebbe says in this Purim Sikha, he says, Chassidus is really about the heart. It's not about the head. Even though we call it Chabad, it's about revealing Elokus in the heart through the head, not bypassing the head. That's the Chiddush. Taking from the Neshama, which is the Ma'ila Ma'aseichel, bringing it into the heart, which is the Mata Ma'aseichel, through the Seichel. That's your Futsu Ma'anisecha Chutz, and the condition is Ma'anisecha. It has to be exact. You can take a nice idea from Chassidus, it's not Chassidus. It's a nice idea, but it's not Chassidus. Chassidus has to be connected to the source, and that's why we find the Chassidim are very makpid when they chazer the Maimer, not to change things. Although you could. Normally you could change Divrei Torah according to your understanding. Why are Chassidim very makpid? Not to add, not to subtract. Because if it's not connected, it will not have its potency. Because only Moshe Rabbeinu can make such a seichel, such a Chabad, that will be megale higher than seichel into Chagas. Higher than Chabad into Chagas, into the heart. Adkan. Good job.